This is the fatal mistake millions of American seniors make every day. Eating nuts they believe are healthy, not knowing those same nuts are slowly robbing them of their sharpness, strength, and independence. And if you're over 60, this video is something you genuinely cannot afford to skip. Hey folks, welcome back to Senior Recharge. I'm Bob Miller, and if you're new here, I'm glad you found us. Pull up a chair, because what I'm about to share with you today is something I wish someone had told me years ago before I started grabbing whatever healthy snack was on the shelf without thinking twice. Now, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a guy in his late 60s who got tired of feeling foggy, slow, and worn out, and decided to actually dig into what was going into my body. And what I found about nuts, something I'd been snacking on for decades, genuinely surprised me. Some of them were quietly doing damage I had no idea about. Others were doing things for my brain I never expected. I've spent the last 3 years researching, testing, and living this, and every video on this channel reflects what's actually made a difference for me personally. If you're new here, subscribe now. We cover real senior health 3 times a week, every single week, built specifically for adults over 60. So today we're going to talk about 5 nuts that may be silently hurting your brain, your memory, your balance, and your overall health as you get older. And then we're going to flip it around and talk about 5 nuts that can actually help rebuild your brain, sharpen your thinking, and keep you steady on your feet. Stay with me through the whole thing, because the ones on the avoid list are going to surprise you. Some of them are sitting in your pantry right now. I know they were in mine. Let's get into it. Now, before we start, do me one favor. Hit that like button right now, because the more people who see this video, the more seniors we help avoid the mistakes that quietly cost them their independence. Now let's go. Brazil nuts have a wonderful reputation in the health world. Rich in selenium, good for the thyroid, often recommended as a smart daily snack. And here's where the problem begins, because that reputation is exactly what makes them dangerous for older adults who aren't paying attention to how many they're eating. Brazil nuts are extraordinarily high in selenium. One single Brazil nut can contain anywhere from 68 to 91 micrograms of selenium. The recommended daily limit for adults is 400 micrograms, and toxicity starts creeping in right around that zone. If you're eating a small handful, which most people do without thinking, you could easily be consuming 2 to 4 times what your body can safely handle in a single sitting. And selenium toxicity doesn't announce itself loudly. It comes in quietly. You might notice your hair thinning, your nails becoming brittle, a strange garlic-like odor on your breath even when you haven't eaten garlic, fatigue that doesn't go away no matter how much sleep you get, muscle tenderness, and in more serious cases, neurological symptoms, tremors, confusion, and difficulty concentrating. For an older adult, these symptoms are easy to dismiss. You might chalk it up to aging, but it could be your daily handful of Brazil nuts slowly pushing your selenium levels into dangerous territory without anyone connecting the dots. There's also the issue of medication interaction. Selenium can interfere with statins, blood thinners, and certain thyroid medications, all prescriptions that are incredibly common in adults over 60. When selenium levels run too high, these medications may not work the way they're supposed to, leaving you exposed to the very conditions they're meant to manage. The cruel irony here is that Brazil nuts are often recommended for thyroid support, and in very small amounts, 1 nut a few times a week, they may genuinely help. But the moment you start snacking freely, the benefits flip into risks. And for most seniors, that line gets crossed without anyone realizing it. Now, cashews. Plain cashews in small amounts aren't the worst thing in the world, But the version sitting in most American pantries, the honey-roasted, flavored, lightly salted variety, that's a different story entirely. Let's start with what's hiding in that coating. Honey-roasted cashews are typically dusted with sugar, corn syrup solids, and modified starches. For someone managing blood sugar, and nearly half of adults over 65 are either diabetic or pre-diabetic, that sugar coating can cause a rapid glucose spike that stresses the pancreas, clouds thinking, and leaves you feeling exhausted and unfocused within an hour of eating. But the blood sugar issue is only the beginning. Cashews naturally contain a high oxalate load compared to most other nuts. Oxalates bind to calcium in the digestive tract, pulling it away before your body can absorb it. Over time, this contributes to calcium depletion in bones, and for older adults whose bone density is already declining, that's a serious compounding problem. It raises your fracture risk, it affects your posture, and it makes every fall more dangerous than it needs to be. The salt in commercially flavored cashews is the third problem. Many brands pack 150 to 200 milligrams of sodium into a single small serving, and very few people stop at one serving. For seniors watching blood pressure, that sodium load adds up fast, quietly pushing circulation issues, increasing fluid retention in the legs, and straining the kidneys. I used to sit down with a bag of honey cashews while watching the evening news, not thinking twice. Now I understand why my ankles were swollen some mornings and why my thinking felt heavy by bedtime. The snack I thought was harmless was stacking up against me in ways I couldn't see. Then there's peanuts. I know, peanuts feel as American as apple pie. I grew up on peanut butter sandwiches. But here's what the research increasingly backs up. Peanuts are quietly one of the most inflammatory foods older adults can snack on regularly, and most people have no idea. First, let's clear something up. Peanuts are not actually nuts. They're legumes. They grow underground, and that environment makes them especially vulnerable to a mold called Aspergillus, which produces aflatoxins. These are toxic compounds linked to liver stress, immune suppression, and long-term cellular damage. And here's the part that gets overlooked. Your liver's ability to filter and neutralize toxins declines significantly after 60. So, what your body handled fine at 35 may be creating hidden strain at 65. Then there's the omega-6 problem. Peanuts are loaded with omega-6 fatty acids, and while we do need some omega-6, most Americans are already consuming way too much, and nowhere near enough omega-3 to balance it out. That imbalance directly fuels systemic inflammation, the kind that shows up as joint stiffness in the morning, brain fog after lunch, sluggish circulation, and that constant, low-grade tiredness that feels like it's just part of getting older. It's not always just part of getting older. Sometimes it's what you're eating. Commercial peanut butter makes things worse. Most brands add hydrogenated oils, which introduce trans fats that directly damage the vascular lining, along with sugar and sodium. For anyone on blood pressure medication, the sodium is already a concern. But the trans fat component quietly stiffens arteries, reduces blood flow to the brain, and accelerates cognitive decline over time. Quick question before we keep going. Which of these nuts have you been eating regularly? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one, and your answer might actually help someone else watching right now. Let's talk about macadamia nuts. They have a luxurious reputation, expensive, buttery, usually associated with something special. And because of that reputation, people assume they must be good for you. The reality for seniors is more complicated than the marketing suggests. Macadamia nuts are among the highest calorie nuts you can eat, and they're among the lowest in protein. That combination is quietly problematic for aging adults. After 60, maintaining muscle mass becomes one of the most critical health priorities you have. Muscle protects your joints, keeps you balanced, prevents falls, and keeps your metabolism running. But muscle maintenance requires adequate protein, and macadamias offer almost none. So what you end up with is a high-calorie, low-protein snack that satisfies hunger without delivering the nutrients your muscles actually need. Over time, if macadamias are displacing other protein sources in your diet, you're essentially feeding your appetite while starving your muscles. A small 1-ounce serving contains around 21 grams of fat and 200 calories. Most people eat 2 to 3 ounces without thinking about it, especially when the nuts come in a large open container. That's 400 to 600 calories from a snack with minimal nutritional return for older bodies. Add to that the fact that most store-bought macadamias are roasted in cheap vegetable oils, high in inflammatory compounds and salted heavily. And it stacks up against you in silence. And finally, in this section, pine nuts. They look harmless, small, delicate, typically sprinkled on salads or mixed into pesto. You'd never suspect they were causing problems. But for older adults on multiple medications, which is most of us, let's be honest, pine nuts can quietly disrupt how your body processes some of the most common prescriptions out there. A compound in pine nuts called pinolenic acid has been flagged in nutritional research for its ability to alter liver enzyme activity, specifically the enzymes responsible for metabolizing medications. When those enzymes are disrupted, drugs meant to regulate blood pressure, manage cholesterol, or support heart rhythm can behave unpredictably. Levels in the bloodstream rise too high or fall too low, and the scary part is that nothing feels obviously wrong until something goes seriously wrong. There's also the pine mouth phenomenon. This is a real documented condition where eating pine nuts triggers a persistent metallic or bitter taste that can last anywhere from a few days to nearly 2 weeks. For a younger person, it's annoying. For a senior already dealing with reduced appetite or struggling to maintain a healthy weight, losing the ability to enjoy food for 2 weeks is a genuine health threat. It can lead to skipping meals, losing weight rapidly, and slowing recovery from illness or injury. And most store-bought pine nuts have been sitting in bulk bins far longer than they should. And oxidized pine nut fat is actively harmful, not just less nutritious. Now here is the part I genuinely love talking about, because this is where things get hopeful. Stay right here, because what I'm about to share are the 5 nuts that can actively start rebuilding what time has been slowly taking. Subscribe now so you never miss a video that could change how you feel every single day. These 5 nuts aren't just not harmful. They're actively working for you, building up what aging tries to tear down, sharpening what time tries to blur. If I had to pick just one nut to eat every single day for the rest of my life, it would be walnuts. No hesitation whatsoever. Walnuts are the richest plant-based source of ALA, alpha-linolenic acid, a type of omega-3 fatty acid that your brain needs to maintain the flexibility of its cell membranes. As those membranes stay flexible, signals between neurons travel faster and more cleanly. Memory gets sharper. Word retrieval gets easier. That feeling of tip-of-the-tongue frustration that so many of us over 60 experience? Research suggests it can actually improve with consistent walnut consumption over time. But what makes walnuts extraordinary isn't just the omega-3 content. It's their concentration of polyphenols, powerful antioxidants that can cross the blood-brain barrier and directly neutralize the oxidative stress that drives brain aging. In a study from the Journal of Nutrition, Health and Aging, seniors who ate walnuts regularly showed measurably better performance on memory tasks and cognitive processing compared to those who didn't. Walnuts also contain natural melatonin, a genuine sleep support compound. And sleep, as any senior knows, is where your brain consolidates memory, flushes waste products, and repairs itself. Better sleep from walnuts means better brain recovery every single night. I eat about 7 or 8 walnut halves every afternoon. Sometimes I throw them on oatmeal in the morning. It takes 30 seconds. And in the months since I started doing it consistently, the brain fog I used to hit around 2 p.m. has largely disappeared. Next up, almonds. And I want to be clear here. We're talking about regular sweet almonds, not bitter almonds, which are a completely different thing. Regular almonds do something remarkable. They support 2 of the biggest vulnerabilities older adults face, bone loss, and cognitive decline simultaneously and with nutrients that work together rather than against each other. The calcium in almonds is well known, but what's less talked about is the magnesium content and why it matters so much for seniors specifically. Magnesium acts as a gatekeeper for calcium, ensuring it gets directed into your bones rather than depositing into arteries or soft tissues. For older adults, this is critically important because calcium without adequate magnesium can actually increase cardiovascular risk. Almonds deliver both in one package, naturally balanced. Almonds also contain vitamin E in its most bioavailable form, which research has consistently linked to slower rates of cognitive decline in aging populations. Think of it as a slow-burning shield for your neurons, and the protein in almonds, about 6 grams per ounce, helps preserve the muscle mass that keeps you balanced, walking steadily, and moving through your day with real confidence. Now pistachios. And here's something that surprised me when I first learned it. Your brain is only as sharp as the blood supply feeding it, and pistachios are one of the most powerful foods for protecting that supply in older adults. Pistachios are uniquely rich in potassium, lutein, and a spectrum of antioxidants that work directly on vascular health, keeping artery walls flexible, reducing inflammation in blood vessels, and supporting smooth, stable blood pressure. In a clinical study published in Hypertension, adults who ate pistachios daily saw a meaningful reduction in systolic blood pressure, the number that matters most for stroke risk in seniors. Better blood pressure means better blood flow to the brain. Better blood flow means sharper thinking, faster recall, and reduced risk of the small vessel damage that often precedes vascular dementia. Pistachios also contain lutein and zeaxanthin, compounds most people associate with eye health, but these same carotenoids have been studied for their role in brain health, with emerging research suggesting they may accumulate in brain tissue and help protect against cognitive decline. And one more thing I love about pistachios, you have to work for them a little. Cracking the shells slows you down, encourages mindful eating, and gives your hands and coordination a small but genuine workout. For seniors managing fine motor skills, that matters more than most people realize. Then there are pecans. These don't get nearly the attention they deserve, and I think it's partly because they're so associated with pie and butter and things that don't exactly scream good for you. But the plain, raw pecan is genuinely one of the most anti-inflammatory nuts an older adult can eat. Pecans are loaded with ellagic acid and other polyphenolic compounds that directly reduce inflammatory markers in the bloodstream, the same markers linked to joint pain, brain fog, arterial stiffness, and accelerated aging. In research published in Nutrition Journal, participants who incorporated pecans into their daily diet showed significant reductions in LDL oxidation, meaning the bad cholesterol became less likely to damage artery walls. For the brain, this matters enormously. Much of what we experience as senior moments, forgetting names, losing the thread of a conversation, feeling mentally sluggish, is driven by chronic low-grade inflammation and compromised circulation. Pecans work on both fronts at once. The USDA's antioxidant research has placed pecans in the top 15 foods for antioxidant content. Every time you eat a small handful of raw pecans, you're flooding your bloodstream with compounds that fight the biological causes of aging at a cellular level. And the fifth nut, one most people don't expect on a brain health list, hazelnuts. The science behind them for older adults comes down to one particular nutrient that most seniors aren't getting nearly enough of: folate. Folate, vitamin B9, plays a direct and well-documented role in brain health. It's essential for regulating homocysteine, an amino acid that, when elevated, is one of the strongest known risk factors for cognitive decline, memory loss, and even Alzheimer's disease. Research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition has linked higher folate intake in older adults with meaningfully better preservation of cognitive function over time. Hazelnuts are one of the richest nut sources of folate available. Combined with their significant vitamin E content, B6, and healthy monounsaturated fats, they create a nutritional environment that supports both brain structure and brain chemistry at the same time. The healthy fats in hazelnuts also support myelin, the protective sheath around nerve fibers that allows signals to travel efficiently through your nervous system. As myelin degrades with age, reaction time slows, coordination suffers, and memory becomes less reliable. Eating foods that support myelin maintenance is one of the most underrated things you can do for long-term brain function. Raw or dry roasted hazelnuts are your best option. Skip the chocolate-coated ones. They're delicious, but that's a conversation for another day. So, let's bring it all together. The 5 nuts to be careful with after 60. Brazil nuts in large amounts, flavored cashews, peanuts, macadamia nuts, and pine nuts. Not because they're all poison, but because for aging bodies, aging livers, and seniors managing medications and blood sugar, they carry real risks that most people simply aren't aware of. And the 5 that may genuinely support your brain, your circulation, your memory, and your independence: walnuts, almonds, pistachios, pecans, and hazelnuts. You don't need to eat all 5 every day. Start with 1 or 2. Make it a habit. Your brain is not finished, and it responds to what you feed it at any age. If you have a spouse, a sibling, a friend over 60 who still snacks without thinking twice about what they're eating, please share this video with them today. One click from you could genuinely protect someone you love. Next Thursday, I'm covering the 5 worst breakfast habits that silently drain your energy after 60. Habits most seniors don't even realize they have. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss it. It's one you'll want to share with your whole family. I'm Bob Miller. Thanks for spending part of your day with me here at Senior Recharge. We post every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 8 a.m. Eastern. Always practical, always real, always for folks just like us. Subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you Thursday. Take good care of yourself